Hi everyone, in this video we're going to talk about temperature compensation. Now, like it or not, engines have to operate over a certain range of temperatures, both the ambient air temperature and the temperature of the engine itself. Now, the engine has to be above ambient temperature because it generates heat, and the only way to reject the heat is for actually to be above ambient temperature. However, we want the air going into the engine to be as cold as possible so that it's the most dense, subject to other considerations such as fuel falling out of suspension and that sort of thing. Now, fuel temperature can also be a variable, although that's discussed in the injector model video. Now, because of all these factors, what ECUs have traditionally done is have a set of compensation tables for temperature of coolant and temperature of air, and these two interact. And this can sometimes produce unexpected results. So this article describes how the modular ECUs handle changes to coolant and air temperature. Now, the first way is our preferred method, which is called charge temperature estimation. This is selected in the main fuel tuning modes page in the software. Rather than having separate corrections for air and coolant temperature, the ECU estimates the charge temperature and uses a single variable for temperature to calculate the air density going into the engine. The charge temperature is calculated using the heat soak percentage map, which can be found under fuel tuning temperature corrections. This percentage relates to how severe the heat soak effect is. Normally, the intake manifold will heat up to engine temperature, so the temperature of the air actually going into the engine will be somewhere in between the air temperature and the coolant temperature of the engine. And the worse that heat soak effect is, the more the coolant temperature will be weighted over the air temperature. So a value of 100% means we're only looking at the coolant temperature, and a value of 0% means we're only looking at the air temperature, and 50% means that the charge temperature is halfway between the two. So a value of 100% would be an extreme case where the heat soak effect is so great that the outside air temperature actually doesn't make any difference at all, and it only matters what the temperature of the engine is because that's the temperature of the air going into it. And a value of 0% would indicate that there's no heat soak effect at all, and that the air temperature going into the engine is accurately measured by the air temp sensor. We might get close to this on an engine with, say, very short runners, individual throttles, open to the air, that sort of thing. Now, in practice, the heat soak effect is greater at lower engine speeds and at lower manifold pressures. So at idle it might be as high as, say, 70%, but at higher engine speeds on boost it might be as low as 20%. So these are starting points that I normally use, and then adjust them manually as needed. Now, if the mixture gets richer as air temperature increases, but the coolant temperature remains the same, then that means that the heat soak percentage is too low, and the ECU needs to weight the value from the air temperature sensor more heavily. If the mixture gets leaner as air temperature increases but coolant temperature remains the same, then that means that the ECU is giving too much weight to the air temperature sensor, and so the heat soak percentage should be reduced. Because the charge temperature is used as part of the air mass calculation, there should be no need for any additional correction above this, and therefore the charge temperature table should be left at 0. However, if you do want to make changes manually, then this is where it's done. You can also trim the value differently at different loads as well if you want to make a difference on vacuum or on boost. Now, if you want to do the temperature trims manually instead, then you can disable the manifold heat soak system in the tuning modes page, and the ECU will use the air temperature as the variable for the air temperature mass in the air mass calculation, and any trims that you want to apply on top of this must be placed in the separate air temperature and coolant temperature correction tables. Setting up engines so that they behave correctly over a wide range of temperatures can be very fiddly, but we find that with the charge temperature estimation model, it's a lot easier than having the two tables separately. And also means that because the air mass is calculated from the ideal gas equation, you can look at the fuel model video for more details on that. It means that very little additional correction is actually needed. Thank you very much.